Northern Russia never felt like a battlefield on paper. On maps it was just white space, cold and empty, like nothing important could survive there. But reality was different. The wind didn't just blow in this place, it cut. It carried ice so sharp it burned skin instead of cooling it. The trees stood frozen like they were trapped mid-scream, and every sound, every step, every breath seemed to travel too far, too loud. This was Sector K-19, a classified border zone that officially didn't exist in public briefings. And tonight it was on fire. Captain Alina Walker, callsign Viper, stood inside what used to be a forward operations post. Now it was barely a shelter. One wall had collapsed inward. The ceiling had cracks running through it like fractured glass waiting to fall. A tactical table flickered under emergency power. Maps kept glitching on the digital screen as interference hit the system every few seconds. Outside, artillery thunder rolled across the frozen terrain. Not random strikes. Targeted ones. "Alina," Sergeant Miles called out, his voice tight as he studied the map feed. "We just lost Delta Relay. That's the third one in an hour." Alina didn't look up immediately. She was listening, not to him but to the pattern. Boom, pause, boom, boom, pause. Her mind wasn't hearing explosions. It was reading rhythm. That rhythm didn't make sense. "They're not scattering fire," she said finally. Miles frowned. "What do you mean?" Alina stepped closer to the display. Her eyes tracked the grid zones collapsing one by one. "This isn't suppression fire," she said. "It's containment." A silence followed that statement. Containment meant one thing. They weren't being pushed back. They were being boxed in. Before anyone could respond, a soldier burst into the room. He was young, too young, and his gear was half covered in snow and blood. "Lieutenant Walker," he gasped. "Outpost Delta is gone. We lost comms and visual in under 10 minutes. No survivors confirmed." The room went still. Even the radio static seemed quieter. Alina turned slowly toward him. "Commander Holt," she asked. The soldier hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. "He stayed behind to cover withdrawal," the soldier said quietly. "He didn't come out." A heavy silence fell across the room. Commander Holt wasn't just a leader. He was the structure holding this entire sector together. Without him, everything shifted. Not just tactically. Psychologically. Miles lowered his voice. "If Delta fell that fast, they're not just advancing, they're hunting us." Alina didn't react emotionally. But something changed in her eyes. Focus sharpened. Processing deepened. She had seen chaos before. Iraq, Syria, Black Zone operations no one talked about afterward. But this wasn't chaos. This was precision violence. And that was worse. The ground shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. The lights flickered. A distant explosion lit up the snow outside like a flash of daylight that didn't belong in night. Alina turned toward the exit. Through the broken doorway, the battlefield stretched endlessly. White snow, black smoke, red fire. And movement in between. Too organized for retreating forces. Too silent for advancing ones. Miles followed her gaze. "That's not normal deployment," he whispered. "No," Alina said. Her voice was lower now. "Controlled. That's encirclement." A second later, another soldier spoke up from behind them. "Ma'am, radar shows movement from west flank too." Then another voice. "North sector is closing." And then, "East is cut off. 3 directions. 3 confirmations. 1 conclusion." Miles exhaled slowly. "We're surrounded." Alina didn't deny it. But she also didn't accept it as the end. Instead, she said something colder. We're being guided. A loud blast erupted in the distance. Closer this time. The building shuddered violently. A support beam cracked overhead. Everyone gear up, Alina ordered immediately. Now. There was no panic in her voice. Only command. The soldiers moved fast, trained instinct overriding fear. Ammo packs, medical kits, comms equipment, only essentials. No extra weight. No hesitation. Miles approached her as she checked her rifle. "You think this is a planned trap?" he asked. Alina loaded a fresh magazine. "I think we walked into something that was already waiting for us," she said. "That doesn't make sense," he replied. She looked at him. "It doesn't have to." A pause. Another explosion echoed closer. The structure groaned again. Alina made a decision. "We move south," Ridgepoint echo. Miles blinked. "That's 40 kilometers through open terrain." "Then we don't walk," she replied. "We survive." A younger soldier spoke nervously from the back. "What if they follow us?" Alina finally turned fully toward the team. That's when they felt it. Not fear. Not panic. Control. "If they follow us," she said calmly, "we stop thinking like targets. A beat. And start thinking like hunters." Outside, the snow was falling harder now. Visibility dropping. The world shrinking. Every sound became distorted, gunfire echoing like it belonged to another planet. Alina stepped out first. Cold hit her instantly, biting through uniform layers, but she didn't react. She scanned the horizon. And then she saw it. A flicker of movement far ahead in the tree line. Not random. Not retreating. Positioning. "Contact," she said quietly. The unit froze instantly behind her. Miles raised his weapon slowly. "How many?" Alina didn't answer immediately. Because she was counting patterns again. Not soldiers. Not weapons. Movement discipline. Formation density. Spacing. And then, "They're not attacking," she said. Miles frowned. "Then what are they doing?" Alina lowered her voice. "They're closing the cage." A sudden burst of gunfire erupted from the left flank. Branches exploded. Snow flew into the air like dust. "DOWN," Alina shouted. They dropped instantly. Bullets tore through where they had just been standing. Return fire erupted. Chaos ignited again. But Alina's mind stayed steady. Because now she understood something critical. This wasn't the beginning of an assault. It was the final phase of one. And they were already inside it. The radio crackled one last time before breaking completely. A distorted voice came through. "Walker, if you're hearing this, extraction is compromised. Repeat, extraction is compromised." Static swallowed the rest. Then silence. Alina tightened her grip on her rifle. No rescue. No backup. No clean exit. Only one option remained. She turned to her team. "Move," she said. And as the snowstorm swallowed them whole, Captain Alina Walker led her unit into the unknown. Not knowing that the war outside was already waiting for them to fall. The snow had turned into something alive. Not gentle, not natural. It moved sideways in violent sheets, whipped by Arctic wind that howled through the broken forest like something angry and endless. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, just shifting white noise swallowing shapes, distance, and direction. Captain Alina Walker kept moving. That was the only rule now. Movement meant survival. Behind her, her unit followed in tight formation, boots crunching into frozen ground that felt less like earth and more like shattered glass. Every step risked noise. Every breath risked exposure. And somewhere in that white chaos, they were being watched. Left flank movement, Sergeant Miles suddenly hissed. Alina dropped instantly. The team followed without hesitation. A burst of gunfire sliced through the trees, ripping bark and snow into the air where they had been standing seconds ago. The shots weren't wild. They were controlled, measured. Like a warning shot. Not to kill yet. To guide. Hold fire, Alina ordered sharply. A few soldiers were already aiming into the tree line. Hold fire. Her voice cut deeper this time. The gunfire stopped. Silence returned, but it wasn't peace. It was pressure. Miles crawled closer. They're flanking us from multiple angles. We saw at least 2 squads on thermal before the storm hit harder. Alina didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed locked forward. Something about this wasn't matching standard engagement logic. They're not rushing us, she said slowly. Miles frowned. What? They have numbers advantage, she continued. They have positioning advantage. They could have overwhelmed us 10 minutes ago. A pause. So why haven't they? No one answered. Because the answer was starting to form in everyone's mind. Alina stood up slowly. Snow hit her face instantly, melting against her skin before freezing again. They're not hunting us, she said. A soldier behind her whispered, then what are they doing? Alina looked into the storm. They're directing us. A distant explosion echoed behind them. Not close, but close enough to remind them of what they had left behind. The forward base was gone now. No fallback. No safe zone. Just open terrain and invisible enemies. Miles checked his map device again. It flickered weakly. GPS is gone, he said. Jamming is getting stronger. Alina nodded once. They're isolating us. A young soldier stepped forward nervously. So, we're cut off completely. Alina looked at him. There was no softness in her expression, but there was clarity. Yes, she said. A long silence followed. Then she added, but isolation doesn't mean defeat. Suddenly, boom! The ground behind them erupted. A controlled explosion. Not random. Strategic. Snow and debris shot upward like a frozen wave. The team scattered instantly. Move, Alina shouted. They ran. But now the terrain itself felt wrong. The forest was narrowing. Paths funneling. Open areas disappearing into tight corridors of trees. Miles ran beside her. This is bad terrain. We're being pushed into a choke zone. Alina didn't slow down. I know, she said. Then why are we going in? She looked at him mid-run. Because refusing the path they want means choosing the path they already prepared. Miles realized what she meant, and his expression tightened. They've mapped this entire escape route. Alina didn't confirm. She didn't need to. Gunfire erupted again, this time from the right. Short controlled bursts. Suppressive. Forcing them forward. Not killing them. Guiding them. A soldier fell behind for half a second. Alina grabbed him and pulled him forward instantly. Don't stop, she ordered. Snow turned red for a moment behind them. Then white swallowed it again. The forest felt endless now. Not open. Not free. But designed. Like a corridor built for collapse. Then the radio crackled. A broken transmission cut through static. Walker, if you can hear, do not proceed North Ridge. The voice cut out. Came back distorted. Repeat, you are being herded. Miles froze mid-step. That's command frequency. Another burst of static. Then silence. Alina tightened her grip on her weapon. They're inside our comms, she said quietly. A soldier behind her whispered, so they know where we are at all times. Alina didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was worse. They don't just know where we are, she said. They know where we're going. The storm suddenly intensified. Wind screamed through the trees. Snow thickened. Visibility dropped to almost zero. Then, a flare lit up the sky. Bright, artificial, illuminating everything for a split second. And in that second, they saw it. Silhouettes. Everywhere. Left ridge, right tree line, ahead corridor. Not random positions. Formations. Encirclement complete. Miles whispered, "We're inside it." Alina stared at the glowing snow. "Yes," she said. "A beat. We are." Then came the voice. Not radio. Not static. Direct. From somewhere ahead in the white darkness. "Calm. Controlled. You've adapted well, Lieutenant Walker." The unit froze instantly. Alina raised her rifle slowly. No panic in her face. Only focus. The voice continued. "You were never supposed to survive this long." Miles whispered, "Who is that?" Alina didn't answer. Because she already understood something terrifying. This wasn't battlefield communication. This was psychological warfare. The voice spoke again. "You're being evaluated." A pause. "And now you've reached the final phase." Suddenly, the gunfire stopped. Every direction. Complete silence. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Then, click. A distant mechanical sound. Like locks engaging. Alina looked around slowly. Snow. Trees. Darkness. And then, a realization hit her. "This isn't a battlefield," she said quietly. Miles turned to her. "What?" Alina's eyes sharpened. "It's a containment grid." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them lit up in faint red lines beneath the snow. Geometric. Precise. A full perimeter forming. Miles stepped back. "What the hell is that?" Alina's voice dropped. "Minefield mapping." A pause. And they just turned it on. A deep rumble echoed beneath the earth. Not explosion. Not gunfire. Something bigger. Controlled activation. The voice returned one last time. "Let's see if you still move forward when the path itself becomes judgment." The red grid tightened. Closing in. Slow. Deliberate. Alina looked at her team. Snow, firelight, encirclement. No exit visible. But her expression didn't break. Instead, she raised her rifle slightly. "Then we stop being guided," she said. "A beat. And start breaking the system." And as the white hell closed in from every direction, Captain Alina Walker took her first step forward. Into a war that was no longer about survival, but control. The red grid under the snow didn't just glow anymore, it moved. Slowly at first, like a heartbeat beneath frozen earth, then faster, lines of light shifting, tightening, recalculating. Captain Alina Walker stood still for half a second longer than she should have. That was all it took for the system to adapt. "Movement confirmed," Miles whispered beside her. "It's tracking us in real time." Alina didn't look down at the grid. She was listening to something else. Not the battlefield. Not the wind. But the pattern behind the war. Something about this activation wasn't fully external. Systems like this didn't respond instantly, without internal confirmation layers. That meant one thing. Human input. "There's a control source," she said quietly. Miles frowned. What? Elena finally turned her head slightly. This grid didn't activate on a timer, she said. Someone turned it on manually. A silence hit the unit harder than gunfire ever could. A soldier behind them whispered, "You're saying someone is watching us, right now." Elena didn't answer immediately, because she already knew the answer was yes. A sudden burst of static ripped through their comm devices. Then, a voice. Not the same as before. This one was closer. Clearer. "Lieutenant Walker." Elena froze. Miles looked at her instantly. "You recognize that voice?" She didn't respond right away. Because she did. And that was the problem. "Captain, you should stop moving." The voice was calm. Too calm. Elena slowly raised her rifle toward the direction it came from. "Identify yourself," she said sharply. A pause. Then, Command Sector Liaison Officer Grant. Miles stiffened immediately. That's internal command. He's supposed to be at HQ. Elena's eyes narrowed. "No," she said quietly, "he's not." The voice continued. "You've entered a controlled containment field. Extraction is no longer authorized." Miles stepped forward. "We've got wounded, we need evac now." A soft exhale came through the speaker. Then the reply. "There is no evac." Silence followed. Even the snow seemed heavier. Elena's grip tightened slightly. "Repeat that," she said. The voice didn't hesitate. "All extraction routes were closed 23 minutes ago. Orders were revised." Miles turned to her instantly. "Revised by who?" Elena didn't answer him, because she was already thinking the same question. The voice spoke again. "You were not meant to exit Sector K-19, Captain Walker." A pause. "You were meant to confirm system response under live pressure." Miles whispered, "This is a test." Elena's expression changed slightly, but not into panic. Into understanding. A colder kind of clarity. "This isn't Russian forces," she said quietly. The voice responded instantly. "No. A beat. It never was." The wind suddenly shifted direction. Snow blew harder into their faces. Visibility dropped again, but this time it felt intentional, like the environment itself was reacting. Miles stepped closer to Elena. "What does that mean? If it's not enemy forces, then who is controlling this?" Elena stared into the storm. And for the first time, she looked unsettled. Not afraid, but calculating something too large to say out loud immediately. Then she spoke. "Internal systems don't deploy this level of coordination without clearance from multiple command layers." A pause. "So either every layer has been compromised." She turned slightly. "Or one layer never existed in the first place." Miles frowned. "That doesn't make sense." Elena looked at him directly. "It does if the war was staged." A sudden explosion erupted far behind them. Not near. Not targeting. A signal. The red grid beneath them flickered. Then restabilized. Miles stepped back. What was that? Elena's eyes locked onto the horizon. "That," she said slowly, "was confirmation." The voice returned. "Correct. A beat. You are not in a conventional war zone, Lieutenant Walker." Elena raised her rifle higher now. "Then what are we in?" A long silence followed. Then the answer came. "A controlled escalation environment." Miles whispered, "That sounds like..." Elena cut him off instantly. "A simulation framework," she finished. The voice didn't deny it. For a moment, everything felt unreal. Snow, wind, gunfire and distance, red grid beneath feet. All of it now had a different meaning. Alina exhaled slowly. "So we're test subjects," she said. The voice corrected her. "Observational operators." Miles snapped. "We're soldiers, not experiments." The voice replied calmly. "Correction noted. Emotional response within expected parameters." That sentence hit harder than any bullet. Alina's jaw tightened. "You're analyzing us," she said. "Yes." "Live." "Yes." A pause. Miles stepped closer to her. "Alina, what do we do?" She didn't answer immediately, because the answer had already changed. This wasn't about escaping enemy fire anymore. It was about breaking a system that predicted every move they made. Then, Alina looked down at the glowing grid again and smiled faintly. Not fear, not surrender, recognition. "They made one mistake," she said quietly. Miles frowned. "What mistake?" Alina raised her eyes. "They assumed we would follow patterns. A beat. And I don't." She suddenly raised her rifle, not at the enemy lines, but at the nearest grid node beneath the snow. Miles widened his eyes. "What are you doing?" Alina didn't look at him. "Breaking the pattern." She fired. The shot hit the ground marker. A sharp electrical pulse exploded outward. For a split second, the entire red grid flickered, then distorted. The voice paused. Unexpected interference. Alina stepped forward instantly. "Now," she ordered. The unit reacted immediately. Not toward escape, toward disruption. They fired at multiple grid points, one after another. Each shot wasn't just combat. It was system damage. The red network stuttered, then began to fracture. Miles realized it instantly. "We're breaking their tracking system." Alina kept moving. "Then keep breaking it." The voice grew slightly less calm. "Lieutenant Walker, cease unauthorized interference." Alina didn't slow down. "For what?" she called back into the storm. "So you can keep watching." Silence. Then, a new tone entered the system. Not human. Not voice. Algorithmic. Escalation threshold reached. The ground beneath them trembled. Miles stepped back. "That doesn't sound good." Alina finally looked around fully now. Snow falling harder. Grid collapsing. Signals distorting. And something new forming underneath it all. She spoke quietly. "No," she said, "now it gets real." Above them, the flare system reactivated. But this time, there were more lights. Not targeting. Not observation. Deployment markers. Alina's eyes narrowed. "They're changing the rules," she said. Miles looked at her. "What does that mean?" Alina tightened her grip on her weapon. "It means we're no longer in containment. A beat. We're in elimination phase." And as the red grid shattered beneath their boots, the war stopped pretending. The moment the grid broke, the silence didn't return. It changed shape. What had once been structured control, measured signals, coordinated movement, predictable pressure, suddenly became something far more dangerous. Chaos with intention. Captain Alina Walker felt it instantly. This wasn't freedom. It was escalation. The snowstorm above them thickened like a closing curtain, but now it carried something new, distant mechanical hums moving across the sky, faint but growing. Miles looked up. "That's not aircraft noise." Alina didn't take her eyes off the tree line. "No," she said quietly, "that's system deployment." A low vibration rolled through the frozen ground again. Not an explosion. A reset. The voice returned, but it wasn't calm anymore. It was fractured. Containment breach confirmed. Recalculating engagement parameters. Subject Unit Walker is no longer compliant. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle. Now they're adapting, she said. Miles stepped closer. To what? Elena finally looked at him. To us not following the script. A distant flash lit up the sky. Not lightning. Not artillery. A beacon. Then another. And another. The horizon began to populate with light points, forming a wide, expanding circle around them. Miles whispered, "They're sealing a second perimeter." Elena shook her head slowly. "No," she corrected, "they're upgrading it." The snow beneath their boots started vibrating. Not from impact. From resonance. Like something beneath the earth was syncing with the sky above. Then, a new sound. Boots. But not random. Perfect rhythm. Too synchronized. Miles raised his weapon instantly. Contact front. Elena didn't move yet. She was watching the pattern. From the white darkness ahead, silhouettes emerged. But these weren't the same enemy units from earlier. These figures moved differently. No hesitation. No scouting. No noise variation. They were identical in spacing. Identical in speed. And their faces. Covered. Not tactical masks. But blank, adaptive visors reflecting the storm like mirrors. Miles swallowed. Those aren't soldiers. Elena exhaled slowly. No, she said, they're enforcement units. A soldier behind them whispered, "We can't fight that." Elena finally raised her rifle. "We don't fight it head-on. A beat. We disrupt it." The enforcement line advanced. Slow. Relentless. Perfect formation. The sky above them pulsed with scanning light. Elena stepped forward slightly. "Listen carefully," she said to her unit. "They're synchronized to system signals. That means they respond to coordination, not chaos." Miles frowned. "So?" Elena's eyes sharpened. "So we remove coordination." Then she turned her rifle, not at the enemy, but at their own comm device. Miles realized instantly, "Wait, don't." Too late. She fired. The unit's communication pack shattered in a burst of sparks. Instantly, static across the battlefield changed pitch. The enforcement formation hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But that fraction was everything. Elena moved. Now, the unit exploded into motion. Not retreat. Not defense. Disruption. They fired into the snow, into signal markers, into the faint light nodes embedded beneath the terrain. Each shot broke synchronization layers. The enforcement units reacted, but slower now. Delayed. Imperfect. Miles saw it immediately. They're losing coordination. Elena didn't stop moving. Keep breaking their rhythm. Gunfire echoed across the frozen valley. But it was different now. This wasn't survival. It was system collapse in real time. Then, a new voice entered the channel. Not broken. Not static. Fully clear. And closer than before. Elena Walker. She froze. Miles looked at her instantly. That's not the system voice. Elena slowly turned her head toward the sound. A figure emerged from the storm. Not armored like the others. Not masked. Just a standard tactical uniform. But the insignia. Internal command. Miles whispered, "That's command personnel." The man stepped closer. His voice was calm. Almost tired. "You've done well." Elena didn't lower her weapon. "Identify yourself." He exhaled slightly. Major Grant, internal operations. Miles blinked. That's the voice from earlier. Elena's eyes narrowed. So you're real. The man nodded. I was never fake, just selectively present. A beat. Elena spoke coldly. You activated the grid. Yes. You deployed enforcement units. Yes. You isolated my team. Yes. Each answer stripped something invisible from the air. Miles stepped forward angrily. You've been playing with us like a simulation. The Major shook his head. Not a simulation. A pause. A controlled escalation test. Elena's voice lowered. For what purpose? The Major looked at her directly. To determine adaptive leadership under total system collapse conditions. Miles whispered, we're still being tested. Elena didn't move. But something in her expression shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Understanding of scale. So this war, she said slowly, was never about territory. The Major nodded. It was about response. A loud mechanical hum grew above them. The sky itself seemed to open slightly as aerial units repositioned. Elena glanced upward briefly. Then back at him. And what happens if I refuse to comply with your test? The Major didn't hesitate. Then the system concludes termination. Miles stepped back slightly. Termination of what? The Major looked at him. All subjects in the operational zone. Silence. Even the wind felt quieter. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle. So this is the end condition. The Major nodded once. Yes. A pause. Unless. Elena finished for him. Unless we override it. The Major's eyes narrowed slightly. That is not possible. Elena looked at the collapsing enforcement units behind him. They're already losing synchronization, she said. The Major turned slightly. He saw it too. The fractured grid systems. The disrupted communication layers. The unstable enforcement formations. For the first time, something like uncertainty appeared in his expression. Elena stepped forward. You built a system that assumes obedience under pressure, she said, but you forgot something. The Major looked at her. And what is that? Elena raised her rifle slightly. Humans don't scale predictably when they realize they're being controlled. A beat. Then, she fired. Not at him. At the final central signal beacon behind him. The impact triggered something massive. The sky flashed white. The ground vibrated violently. Every remaining grid node in the field collapsed simultaneously. Enforcement units froze mid-motion. Then, disrupted. The entire system stuttered like a failing machine trying to reboot itself. The Major took a step back. Impossible. Elena lowered her weapon slightly. No, she said quietly, just unexpected. Miles stared around. Did we just break it? Elena didn't answer immediately. Because she wasn't sure yet. The storm began to clear slightly. Not fully. But enough. The enforcement units began to retreat, not in coordination anymore but confusion. The sky's scanning lights dimmed. The mechanical hum faded. And for the first time since it began, the battlefield felt uncontrolled. The Major looked at Elena one last time. You don't understand what you've done. Elena met his gaze. I understand enough. A long pause. Then he turned and disappeared into the storm. No threat. No warning. Just gone. Miles exhaled heavily. Is it over? Elena looked at the fatting battlefield. Snow still falling. But lighter now. She lowered her rifle slightly. "No," she said. "A beat. This was just one layer." She turned toward her unit. "We move." Miles frowned. "Where?" Elena stared into the white horizon. "Out of their system." And as the storm slowly began to break, Captain Elena Walker led what remained of her team forward. Not as subjects anymore, but as the first anomaly the system failed to predict.